there is 1 billion people in the world today suffering from mental health disorders like depression, anxiety, and addiction. This figure is so high that statistically speaking, it means that right now, one of the people that you love the most, like a parent, a sibling, a son or daughter, a best friend, is suffering from one of these right now. Suicide rates in the United States are the highest ever recorded. We are right now in the middle of the biggest mental health crisis in the history of humanity. It turns out that one of the people in that statistic was me. About 5 years ago, I found myself in a depression. There were days where I could barely get out of bed. I was confronted with deep, crushing loneliness. I was drinking way too much alcohol, spending way too much time in front of screens. I felt literally trapped inside my life with no options, no room for movement. And I was constantly crying where nobody was watching. But in the midst of that very dark period, somehow I came across psychedelics. And psychedelics helped me in re-engaging with life. Not taking them in a party context, but taking them in the company of coaches and shamans of various lineages. They helped me, first of all, realize that I was in a depression, because I didn't even know it, and then to slowly come out of it. And not through numbing myself, the way modern antidepressants do, but through facilitating a process where I came very, very close to my shadows, to my demons, to my sometimes very selfish ego. Through somehow creating a reset in my brain so that I could see that my range of options was way wider than I had previously thought. And that reboot also somehow enabled me to slowly make changes that once seemed impossible. Through inviting me to spend more time in nature. And most of all, through making me realize how important it is to nurture the relationships with the people I love most. And this almost cliche sounding process of awakening was so massive that I felt compelled to do in-depth research to figure out what just happened, why, and how come I had not heard of these powerful substances in a positive light ever before. It turns out that my case is far from being exceptional. Many, many people have been able to heal from so many mental health disorders with the help of psychedelics. It turns out that what a lot of the modern mental health problems, like depression, anxiety, addiction, all of these, what they have in common is they tend to have trauma or disconnection. And these two things tend to exist together in symbiosis. And psychedelics can help with both. But for us as humanity to be able to unlock all of that potential, we need to take a step back and first move psychedelics from this category of illegal drugs from a completely different category of medicines. So, let's begin with, what are psychedelics? Many of you might be asking, what exactly is that? And these are substances that exist in nature. They exist in literally hundreds of plants and fungi, and these plants and fungi have existed on planet Earth way before the first human beings, the first Homo sapiens existed. And right now, the most common ones are psilocybin mushrooms, often called magic mushrooms. Then there's ayahuasca, which is a tea made from a vine and a root coming from the Amazon rainforest. And then there's also synthetic psychedelics. What they all have in common, these substances, is when a human being takes them, our state of awareness changes. And a lot of it still we don't fully understand, but our state of awareness changes from our normal awake state of mind in which we live most of our life to a state of awareness that is closer to dreams and where we are able to be in touch with the unconscious part of our brain. Civilizations that existed thousands of years ago, beginning with the ancient Greeks, Plato himself, and some of the most millenary civilizations of the Americas before colonization happened, the Mayas, the Aztecs, the Incas, and there is even mention of psychedelics in the most ancient Indian texts, the Vedas. All of these civilizations, continents apart, many, many years apart from each other, they were all working with psychedelics in a way where they were exploring them for cognitive enhancement, for rites of passage, for healing. All of these are uses that psychedelics still have today. Now, the problem is, in the modern era, religion and science separated into silos that don't really talk to each other. And unfortunately, somehow psychedelics were seen as just dangerous substances that should be thrown in a bucket called illegal drugs. The problem with that is that our modern definition of drugs includes such a wide range of substances, from opioids, heroin, cocaine, cannabis, and then also psychedelics, all lumped into one single thing, drugs. But there's two key differences why psychedelics do not belong in there. Number one, psychedelics are not addictive. This is scientifically proven. It is pure science. They are not addictive. Addictive is coffee, even sugar. Alcohol, many other things are addictive. Psychedelics are not. Number two, psychedelics are remarkably safe physiologically. What this means is that it's almost impossible to die from an overdose. So one can even die from an overdose from many things in the average kitchen cabinet, not with psychedelics. This does not mean that we should not approach psychedelics with a lot of care and respect. They are incredibly safe physiologically, physically in the body, but of course they have a massive effect in our mind. So we need to be careful when we take them. And I would go as far to say that to fully unlock the potential of psychedelics, they absolutely must be taken with the company of a guide, a shaman, a facilitator, a therapist, who will prepare the person before, accompany the person during the experience, and also afterwards. Because psychedelics are not like taking a pill. It's more like a key that opens a door so that we put down the defenses of the ego. But what happens once you've opened that door, it really depends a lot on the set and setting, on the preparation. And actually, this is exactly how psychedelics, specifically psilocybin, just last year was legalized in the state of Oregon in the United States as a prescription medicine that can only be given by a vetted guide. Now, you may ask, so how exactly do psychedelics facilitate this healing? And the truth is that there's a lot that we don't know. So what we know is probably just the tip of an iceberg. But as the scientist Stanislav Grof said, psychedelics will be to the study of the mind what the microscope was to the study of biology, or what the telescope was to the study of astronomy. So we still kind of don't know the vastness of what we will discover on how exactly these processes happen. But there's a bit that we do know, and I'd like to share this with you because I find it fascinating. Let's take the example of depression. So a depressed person feels very, very sad. And as I said, modern antidepressants, what they do is numb you so you don't feel this sadness so much. How psychedelics work is completely different. So it's not through trying to get you not to feel that sadness, but rather helping you understand why that sadness, what is causing the sadness. Because normally sadness or anger, whatever it is, these feelings tend to be more a symptom of something else. And psychedelics enable us to explore that something else. Some people may know what that is, some others may not even know it. It may relate to events that happened when we were so little that we don't remember consciously any of it. But then in a psychedelic experience, what happens is there's something called neuroplasticity, and it literally means the generation of new connections within the brain. So the brain is hyper-connected, and you are also being able to access your unconscious. So you are able to access some experiences, feelings that you've put under the rug, so to say, because you cannot live with them. But unfortunately, when we put things like that under the rug, mentally speaking, we are still shutting ourselves. And this is still going to come out in our life, in bits and pieces of behavior that tend to be very destructive. So through psychedelics, we access those moments, we access those feelings, but with the increased plasticity, we are able to reframe them. We are able to rewrite the stories that define us, our deepest beliefs. And through that, we are then able to exit the negative mental loops that haunt us for a lifetime and that stunt our ability to love and to relate to others. There's now hundreds of different scientific studies, clinical trials going on to look at how psychedelics can heal not just depression, but also post-traumatic stress disorder, which is the most intense form of trauma. This is the trauma of people who have been raped, who have been at war, and after that event, they are not able to come back to society, to life. Psychedelics for healing addiction to heroin, to cocaine, to alcohol. Psychedelics for dealing with all forms of anxiety, eating disorders. And these trials are underway, and what's really amazing is basically we're now going through what's being termed the psychedelics renaissance. So there's, just in the last 5 years, billions of dollars have been poured into startups that are working on proving to governments around the world that psychedelics should be legal medicines. Last, I'd like to tell you a tiny bit about what psychedelics can do also for people who are healthy, because it's not just for people who are, quote unquote, ill. And one of those is psychedelics for cognitive enhancement. And it was really funny because I felt I was the last person literally to find out about something called microdosing, which is taking psychedelics in teeny tiny doses that don't fully change our perception, but that still have a subtle effect that we don't fully understand. But in Silicon Valley, people have been doing this as a common practice at work for decades. And even Steve Jobs credited LSD with some of his best ideas. And it's no wonder, because we know the brain is hyper-connected. We are literally being able to think outside the box. Of course, we're going to be able to be more creative. Then there's also studies looking at psychedelics for physical enhancement. So being more resistant at sports, like that extra 20, 30% improvement in whatever it is we were doing. And then finally, studies looking at how psychedelics can help us be more present in the present moment. And I am so sure that actually that is why psychedelics help improve performance, both mentally and physically, because we are fully present. And finally, and this is, to me, the most interesting effects of all, and it is the one that we understand the least, but it is probably at the heart of why psychedelics can help with so many other things. And it is psychedelics can help us find our spiritual being. For people like me, who were never able to find spirituality through religion, psychedelics help us feel, experience that we are not just a body and a mind, but that there's a spirit. Some call it God, some call it grace. There's something bigger than ourselves. It's a mystery. And about this mystery, there's been lots written. There's the Bible, there's the Quran, there's many other texts. But it's very different to read about this in a book than to experience it. To experience that we are one with the universe, that we are part of the bigger cosmos. And in fact, this is also why another word for the word psychedelic is entheogen. It means generating the sacred. And this experience is actually the end game of every single mindfulness practice. In Buddhist texts, in Hindu texts, is called samadhi, and it's often referred to as enlightenment. There might be monks and Buddhists that go into a cave for months and years and they achieve samadhi, they achieve this enlightenment, they feel at one with the universe. But for people like me, and I think literally for most human beings, normal human beings who are not sitting in a cave, that's pretty much impossible. And so this is why some say psychedelics is like putting a rocket to what otherwise would be a sailing boat through meditation. And once we can feel this, everything else kind of falls into place. I'd like to envisage a future in which psychedelics are not illegal drugs, but that they are recognized, re-explored, relabeled as medicines. I'd like to envisage the shamans, the elders, the healers of the most ancient civilizations on Earth who are still alive to come to the forefront and share with our doctors, our psychiatrists, what they know about psychedelics, their wisdom, so that many more, millions of people can heal from the darkness of depression, of anxiety, of addiction, and rediscover what it is to be alive. Thank you.